Dr. Samuel Hayes possessed all that one could aspire to: affluence, achievement, and a steadfast standing as one of the premier gynecologists in New York City. At 52, he held the position of head of gynecology at Mount Sinai Hospital, a sanctuary where patients in need sought hope and answers. His existence was organized, carefully arranged to the very last detail. As he entered his penthouse with a view of Central Park in the morning and later returned late at night, fatigue creeping into his very being, he found no space for diversions. He dedicated decades to crafting his career, prioritizing medicine above all else. Affection, kinship, and individual joy. They referred to him as a genius, a master of his craft. Yet he frequently pondered whether all that admiration concealed an empty life. On a brisk December morning, as he savored his black coffee and perused patient files, a gentle knock on the door announced his secretary, Linda. "Dr. Hayes, the board meeting is set to commence in 10 minutes. He nodded, his gaze fixed downward, immersed in the intricate notes of a challenging case. A prominent figure in the social scene was set to undergo a sensitive procedure, and the press was already abuzz with excitement. He had no desire for attention, yet it seemed to pursue him relentlessly. The hospital corridors buzzed with a palpable tension as he made his way through, greeted by nurses and interns who looked at him with a blend of respect and trepidation. He was meticulous, and in his realm, errors were simply not tolerated. His peers held him in high regard, yet none ventured to bridge the distance. Following the meeting, he faced a series of surgeries, each demanding his complete focus. As he prepared for the first operation, his thoughts drifted for a fleeting instant, a rarity for him. He reminisced about the past, recalling a time when he was a young medical student at Columbia University, deeply infatuated with a girl named Laura Bennett. She had once been his entire universe, his first love, the kind that instilled a belief in eternity. Yet eternity possessed a harsh manner of unfolding. When he received a rare chance to learn from the top surgeons in Boston, he departed, assuring Laura that he would return for her. He simply didn't. Life rushed by, aspirations dominated, and in the end, he persuaded himself that affection was merely an interruption. Hours later, as he peeled off his gloves and emerged from the operating room, a profound fatigue settled upon him, pressing down like a heavy cloak. Just as he was about to enjoy a quick snack in the doctor's lounge, Linda made her way over once more. "A distinguished patient has arrived in the emergency room. Intense discomfort in the abdominal region. The chief resident suspects it may be a multifaceted gynecological concern. They require your attention on this matter." He strode confidently toward the emergency ward, unwavering in his purpose. A young woman in her 20s lay curled up, racked with pain. Her breath came in ragged gasps, fingers clutching the hospital sheets with a fierce intensity. The chart unveiled the name, Emily Bennett. A faint echo of familiarity brushed against his thoughts, yet he chose to set it aside. Bennett was a frequently encountered surname. As he scrutinized her, an unusual sensation took root in his chest. She possessed a unique genetic condition, a particular anomaly in her reproductive system that he had encountered only once previously. An analysis he had engaged with many years prior. His father possessed the identical genetic marker. His heart raced with a fervor unlike anything he experienced in the operating room. He compelled himself to concentrate. "We need to conduct further tests," he stated, his tone steady yet resolute. The girl gazed at him, her eyes heavy with fatigue. There was an undeniable sense of familiarity about them, yet he found himself unable to pinpoint why. "Is it a matter of great importance?" she inquired, her voice barely above a whisper. "We'll find a way," he promised her, taking a step back. Thoughts surged through his mind, a flurry of questions emerging quicker than he could grasp. He sought answers, and for the first time in his journey, uncertainty clouded his readiness to confront them. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Laura Bennett had never envisioned herself as a single mother. In her youth, she nurtured dreams, grand, enchanting visions of a life brimming with love, adventure, and a sense of safety. Yet fate had a different course in mind. During their college years at Columbia University, she found herself captivated by Samuel Hayes. He was exceptional, driven, and utterly enchanted her like no one before. They wandered the streets of Manhattan under the cover of night, sharing dreams of the future and vowing that, come what may, they would always return to one another. Yet, there was a tendency for commitments to shatter when desire for success intervened. Upon receiving the chance to train in Boston with one of the nation's top surgeons, Samuel seized the opportunity without a moment's doubt. Initially, he reached out, expressing his commitment to come back. As the months stretched into years, the calls dwindled, the letters ceased, and ultimately, Laura came to terms with the heart-wrenching reality. He had moved on. Unbeknownst to him, by the moment he departed, she was already carrying a child. At 23, facing a lack of support and uncertainty about how to navigate motherhood alone, Laura confronted the most challenging choice of her life. She pondered the idea of revealing her thoughts to him, contemplated crafting one final letter, yet each time, an unseen force held her back. He was engrossed in constructing his empire, and she understood that he wouldn't abandon his pursuits for a child he never intended to have. She assured herself that this was the preferable path. She would nurture Emily independently, and they would manage perfectly well. Indeed, they largely were. Though life presented its challenges, Laura dedicated herself to 2 jobs, giving up everything to ensure her daughter had the best life imaginable. Emily was raised with intelligence, kindness, and a strong sense of independence, all while remaining unaware of the father who had inadvertently abandoned her. As Laura sat in the waiting area of Mount Sinai Hospital, her gaze fixed on the closed door of the emergency ward, a wave of fear washed over her, a sensation she hadn't felt in years. For weeks, Emily had been experiencing abdominal pain, yet she continually dismissed it, adamantly claiming she was perfectly fine. It was only when she fell to the floor in their cramped Brooklyn apartment that Laura felt a surge of panic and hurried her to the hospital. As soon as they arrived, the doctor leaped into action, issuing orders for tests and getting her ready for the possibility of surgery. Then, they summoned the hospital's top gynecologist. The name sent a chill coursing through her. Dr. Samuel Hayes. It must have been mere chance. Fate couldn't possibly be this merciless. After 2 decades apart, the instant he entered the room, she recognized him immediately. He appeared more mature, refined, yet the fire in his gaze remained unchanged. He cast a fleeting look at Emily, then shifted his gaze to the chart, and a subtle transformation flickered across his expression. Laura remained still, her breath caught in anticipation, her eyes fixed intently on the unfolding scene. Was she familiar to him? Did he sense the burden of history bearing down on him as she did? Yet he remained silent. He regarded Emily with the same clinical distance he likely maintained with all his patients. He concealed any emotions he might have felt with remarkable skill. Now she sat there, her heart racing, contemplating whether she had erred profoundly all those years back. She had persuaded herself that Emily was perfectly capable without him, that they had managed quite well independently. Yet what if she had erred? What if, all this time, Emily had been unaware of a crucial element that was absent from her life? What would happen if Samuel uncovered the truth? Could he possibly feel anger? Would he truly care? In the quiet confines of the hospital room, Emily reclined on the bed, her gaze fixed on the ceiling as she grappled with her thoughts. Having always enjoyed good health, the experience of being in a hospital felt quite unusual to her. There was an unsettling quality about that doctor that left her feeling uneasy. He exhibited kindness yet maintained a certain distance, balancing professionalism with an air of familiarity. She couldn't quite grasp the reason, but when he gazed at her, it felt unlike any other physician she had encountered before. Perhaps it was merely a figment of her imagination, or perhaps it was something deeper. With her eyes gently shut, surrendering to fatigue, Dr. Hayes remained in his office, fixated on Emily's medical records. His hands quivered ever so slightly as he followed the details of the genetic condition noted in her file. It was quite rare. Indeed, it was so uncommon that merely a few instances had ever been recorded. He was certain it was a trait passed down through generations. His father possessed it. He possessed it. And now, it seems, this young woman has also joined the ranks. A heavy sensation lodged itself in his chest, a sensation he hadn't felt in years. He reminisced about the girl he had cherished all those years ago. Laura, the one he abandoned, the one he had never glanced back at. Thoughts surged through him as he calculated the numbers. Emily had just turned 20. He departed 2 decades and 1 year ago. A chilling awareness enveloped him. Is it truly feasible? Negative. Simply couldn't be done. Was it really? Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Emily had always found hospitals to be uninviting places. The scent of antiseptic lingered in the air, accompanied by the rhythmic beeping of machines, creating an atmosphere of unsettling sterility. For most of her life, she had steered clear of doctors unless it was truly unavoidable. This was due in part to her mother's financial struggles with regular medical appointments, and also because she despised the unsettling atmosphere of hospitals. Petite, fragile, akin to merely another digit in a system that remained indifferent. Yet here she was, confined to a hospital bed at Mount Sinai, wires connected to her body, with 4 fluids slowly seeping into her veins, leaving her with no options. The discomfort that began as a subtle throb weeks prior had escalated into an excruciating torment, something that caused her legs to buckle beneath her in their small Brooklyn apartment. She had little recollection of the ambulance journey, just her mother's frantic voice echoing in her ears, hands clutching Emily's, as if she feared the moment would slip away. As she gazed at the ceiling, anticipation gnawed at her, her thoughts swirling around the figure of Dr. Samuel Hayes. Something about him stirred a sense of unease within her, though she struggled to identify the source of her discomfort. He maintained a professional demeanor, exuding calmness and precision in his movements. Yet when his gaze met hers, an additional layer of emotion flickered in his expression. It wasn't sympathy that she had encountered with numerous doctors in the past. It wasn't a lack of concern either. It was an intricate web, a profound complexity beneath the surface. She reassured herself that it was just her imagination. He was merely a doctor fulfilling his duties, and she was simply a patient seeking care. Yet, beneath the surface, she understood that it wasn't the reality she believed. In the corridor outside the hospital room, Laura stood with her arms tightly crossed over her chest, her thoughts swirling in a chaotic dance. For the last 20 years, she dedicated herself to crafting a life for her daughter, carefully protecting her from the shadows of the past, ensuring she never sensed a void in her existence. Yet now, everything was coming apart at the seams. She had never anticipated crossing paths with Samuel again, had never wished for it, and yet destiny had intertwined their lives once more. He was on the brink of uncovering the truth. In that fleeting instant, she caught the glimmer of understanding in his gaze, the way his fingers clenched around Emily's chart with an intensity that spoke volumes. He sensed that something was amiss. Eventually, he would connect the dots. She recalled the night he departed, how she had lingered outside his apartment in the biting rain, her hands trembling as she held tightly to the letter she had penned. She intended to reveal all, to plead with him to remain, to at least provide their child the opportunity to know him. Yet, when she rapped on his door, silence greeted her. The following day, she discovered he had already left, heading to Boston in pursuit of a dream that excluded her. She ripped the letter into shreds and moved on without a second glance. Up to this point, within the confines of his office, Samuel positioned himself at his desk, gazing intently at Emily's file, as if it contained the solutions to all his past errors. He was not a man given to emotions, nor was he one to allow the past to shape his choices. Yet this was unlike anything else. He had devoted his whole existence to the belief that he was childless, that his creations would serve as his legacy, and that he had traded personal joy for a purpose beyond himself. And still, the proof lay plainly before him. The dates aligned perfectly. The genetic condition was no mere coincidence. As he reflected on Emily, he envisioned her eyes, the contours of her face, and the way she had gazed at him, conveying a depth of feeling that words could not capture. He was aware. his hands clenched into tight fists on the desk. Laura had kept it to herself all along. For 2 decades, she had concealed this from him. A fragment of his being yearned to burst into the waiting room and insist on explanations. Another aspect of him, the analytical side that had been conditioned to reason clearly, understood that it wouldn't alter anything. What has been done is now in the past. The true inquiry was what comes next. In the hospital room, Emily shifted restlessly, the ache in her abdomen subsiding a bit but still lingering. She glanced over at her mother, who had at last returned indoors. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raspy. "Do you believe the doctor has an understanding of my condition?" Laura managed to smile while perched on the edge of the bed. "He's truly one of the finest, darling. He's the one who can crack the code." The words tasted like treachery on her lips. Emily paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. He appeared transformed. Laura's heart raced with intensity. "In what way is it different?" Emily gave a slight shrug. "I'm uncertain. Felt as if he understood me completely. But that's foolish, isn't it? I have yet to encounter him." Laura grasped her daughter's hand, holding it firmly. "You're simply feeling worn out, my dear. Make sure to take some time to relax." As Emily closed her eyes, her mother remained seated, observing her, fully aware that the delicate world they had constructed was on the brink of falling apart, and she found herself powerless to intervene. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, like our content, and share it with your friends. Samuel found it impossible to focus on anything else after leaving Emily's hospital room. He had executed countless surgeries throughout his career, navigated life and death choices in the operating room, and confronted some of the most intricate medical cases with unwavering calmness. Yet, nothing had ever shaken him quite like this. He sat in his office, his fingers dancing lightly on the desk as he gazed intently at the medical records laid out before him. Every detail in that file shouted at him, validating what his instincts had already whispered. Emily was his beloved daughter. The genetic condition was uncommon, nearly unknown beyond his own lineage. The timeline aligned flawlessly, right down to the exact year he had last encountered Laura. He couldn't shake the image of Laura's expression from his thoughts, the tightness in her features, the cautious tone of her words lingering in the air. She was aware. She had been aware from the very beginning. And still, she opted to shroud him in secrecy, to nurture Emily while withholding the truth of his fatherhood. The rage that simmered within him felt strange, unrecognizable. He typically moved forward without looking back, yet this situation felt unique. This was not solely about him. A young woman lay in a hospital bed, unaware of the reality of her own existence. Laura paced outside the hospital room, her fists tightly clenched at her sides. She was aware that it was just a question of when Samuel would face her. He possessed an intellect so sharp and a meticulous nature so pronounced that he could not overlook the signs. Yet she was not prepared. How could she articulate 20 years of silence? What reasoning could she offer for the decision she had taken so long ago? In that moment, it appeared to be the sole choice available. Samuel was filled with ambition and determination, leaving no space in his life for a child. She had persuaded herself that revealing the truth would only add layers of complexity, that Emily would fare better without his presence. Yet here she was, in the very same hospital, observing the way he had gazed at Emily, and doubt began to creep in. Perhaps she had erred. Perhaps she had taken something from her daughter that she shouldn't have claimed as her own. The realization washed over her like a tidal wave of guilt, more intense than anything she had ever experienced. Emily, oblivious to the tempest gathering in the shadows, attempted to dismiss the persistent unease that clung to her heart. There was an unsettling feeling in the air. It wasn't merely the discomfort in her abdomen or the anxiety of what the doctors might discover. It was an exploration of profound depths. She possessed a remarkable talent for understanding others, and Dr. Hayes was no different. In his gaze, there was a brief spark, a hint of something deeper than mere professionalism, an unmistakable sense of recognition. Yet that seemed utterly unattainable. They were strangers to one another. Still, She couldn't dispel the nagging sensation that he was familiar, as if their paths had crossed in some way she couldn't quite place. She reflected on her mother's behavior since their arrival at the hospital, the anxious looks, the deliberate distance. It was utterly perplexing. No, that was absolutely wild. Was it not? Samuel ultimately reached his conclusion. He couldn't remain in his office and feign ignorance of the truth. He had never been the type to shy away from challenging circumstances, and he certainly wasn't about to begin now. He rose to his feet, his jaw clenched as he approached the waiting area, fully aware that Laura would be there. He spotted her by the vending machines, arms folded, gazing at the ground as if she were deep in contemplation. As she lifted her eyes to meet his, he caught a glimpse of panic flicker across her face before she swiftly concealed it. Yet the moment had passed. He had witnessed all that was essential. "We need to talk," he said, his voice softer than normal. Laura released a deep breath, giving a thoughtful nod. "No, not here," she whispered, guiding him to a more secluded part of the hallway. In that brief silence, words eluded them both. The atmosphere surrounding them was dense, laden with a history of unexpressed sentiments. Samuel was the one to shatter the stillness. "Isn't she mine?" His voice carried a serene quality, yet beneath it lay a subtle tension, an enigmatic undertone. Laura took a deep breath. Deceit serves no purpose. He was already aware. "Indeed," she confessed, her voice scarcely rising above a whisper. Samuel exhaled deeply, his fingers tangling in his hair. He murmured to himself, "You never told me," as if the words were meant for her but lingered in the air instead. "What is the reason behind this?" She averted her gaze, a heavy sense of guilt bearing down on her. "Samuel, you were on your way out. Your entire future was laid out before you. Once you envisioned a future filled with aspirations and schemes. I never intended to hinder your progress." He released a sardonic laugh. "So you made the choice on my behalf? You assumed I wouldn't care to learn about my daughter?" Laura recoiled. "I was youthful and filled with fear. Perhaps, just perhaps, I feared that your return would stem from a sense of duty rather than a genuine desire to be here." His jaw clenched. "That decision wasn't yours to take." "I know," she whispered, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "I understand that now." They lingered in quietude for an extended moment. At last, Samuel uttered another word, his tone subdued. "Is she aware?" Laura gave a slight shake of her head. "Negative. I kept everything about you to myself." Samuel took a deep breath. He found himself uncertain if that improved the situation or complicated it further. Throughout her life, his daughter remained completely unaware of his existence. And now, here they found themselves, brought together by destiny in the most extraordinary manner. He finally spoke up. "I need time in order to proceed with this." Laura gave a slight nod. "I comprehend." Yet, the reality was that time was a luxury they simply did not possess. Emily was unwell, and before long, she would require an operation. Upon awakening, the reality she once understood had irrevocably transformed. Before moving on, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Samuel turned from Laura, his thoughts swirling with feelings he couldn't quite grasp. He dedicated years to perfecting the skill of maintaining control, ensuring that his emotions remained distinct from his professional endeavors and personal experiences. However, this was unlike anything else. His own daughter lay in a hospital bed, enduring pain, and he had only just discovered her existence. The burden of it all bore down on him like a heavy anchor, stifling and unavoidable. He wandered through the hospital corridors, his mind in a haze, hardly aware of the activity surrounding him. Nurses hurried by, doctors whispered in low voices, patients were transported into rooms, but everything seemed far away, almost surreal. He craved time, yet time was a luxury he could not afford. Emily's condition was deteriorating, and he was the one tasked with performing the surgery on her. He couldn't help but notice the irony of the situation. He had devoted his existence to rescuing others, Yet the most significant individual he had ever unwittingly lost was now completely under his care. In the quiet of Emily's hospital room, she gazed at the ceiling, attempting to untangle the storm of feelings swirling within her. There was an unsettling feeling in the air. She sensed it the instant she laid eyes on Dr. Hayes. An unvoiced tension lingered between him and her mother, hinting at something deeper than a mere doctor-patient connection. The way he gazed at her, as if he recognized something intimate, something deeply personal, sent a shiver of unease through her. She had been raised without a father, never inquiring about him since her mother had firmly established that he was absent from their lives. Yet, at this moment, curiosity tugged at her thoughts. What if she had been deceived? What if the man who had just exited her hospital room possessed a deeper understanding of her than she had of her own self? The idea twisted in her gut. She sought the truth, yet a deep fear gripped her at the thought of what it might reveal. Laura lingered by Emily's bedside, observing her daughter's features as she floated between the realms of wakefulness and slumber. Her heart throbbed with remorse. She had concealed the truth from Emily throughout her entire life, convinced that she was acting in her best interest. Yet, confronted with the truth of the matter, her certainty began to waver. Perhaps she had acted out of self-interest. Perhaps she allowed her own anxieties to influence a decision that was never meant to be hers. Encountering Samuel once more had unsettled her in ways she was reluctant to acknowledge. He remained the same man, intelligent, composed, and unreadable. Yet there was an additional spark in his eyes when he faced her. Deceit. And beneath it all, there lies something even more profound: regret. She was intimately familiar with that sensation. Samuel finally returned to his office, closing the door behind him and pausing for a moment against it. He required some contemplation. He had to determine the path ahead, to become the person Emily required him to be. How is it possible to bridge 2 decades of absence in just one fleeting moment? How do you convey to a young woman resting in a hospital bed that everything she believed about her life was untrue? After years of conveying challenging news to patients, this situation felt distinct. This was not focused on a diagnosis or a treatment strategy. This held deep significance. Despite his deepest desires, he found himself unable to alter what had already transpired. As the sun sank beneath the horizon hours later, Samuel stood outside Emily's hospital room once again. He paused, hand hovering over the door handle, his heart racing with an intensity he had never experienced before. Laura glanced up as he walked in, her demeanor cautious. Emily roused at the sound of the door, her weary eyes blinking up at him. For a fleeting moment, he remained still, caught in a web of uncertainty about how to express himself. With a deep breath, he moved in closer. "How are you doing today?" he inquired, his tone gentler than normal. Emily regarded him intently for a considerable time before she responded. "Seems improved, I suppose." Samuel nodded, his gaze drifting to the monitors flanking her bed. All appeared calm, yet he understood more than anyone how swiftly circumstances could shift. He glanced back at her, locking eyes with her gaze. "Soon you'll be undergoing surgery. We are eager to move forward." Emily swallowed hard, her head bobbing in agreement. "Understood." Laura took hold of Emily's hand, giving it a soft squeeze. Samuel observed the interaction, experiencing an unexpected twinge of emotion deep within his heart. He had overlooked countless moments. First steps, first words, birthdays, and those cherished late-night conversations. At this moment, the genuine dialogue unfolding between him and his daughter revolved around a surgery that held the potential to transform their lives entirely. "Dr. Hayes?" Emily's voice interrupted his musings. He stood tall. "Absolutely." She paused, casting a quick look at her mother before turning her gaze back to him. "Are we acquainted?" Samuel felt a sudden tightness in his throat. He sensed Laura's tension beside him, yet he refrained from glancing her way. Instead, he maintained his attention on Emily, observing the uncertainty reflected in her eyes. This was the moment he had feared, the moment that would alter the course of everything. He inhaled deeply, selecting his words with precision. He finally spoke. No. However, I believe it's time for us to have a conversation. Laura averted her gaze, remorse evident on her features. Emily's brow knitted together, uncertainty intertwining with a deeper emotion, trepidation. Samuel held no resentment towards her. He felt fear as well. Yet, the point of no return had been reached. The truth awaited discovery, and soon Emily would uncover it. The sole inquiry was, how would she navigate this situation? Before moving on to the next segment, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Samuel perched on the chair next to Emily's hospital bed, his heart racing within his chest. He had endured intricate surgeries and moments that danced on the edge of life and death. Yet this, revealing the truth to his daughter, felt more daunting than anything he had ever faced. Laura lingered by the window, her arms folded, deliberately steering clear of his eyes. The atmosphere in the room was heavy, weighing on everyone present. Emily observed him with a blend of caution and intrigue, her brown eyes scanning his features for clues. She had always possessed a keen intuition for understanding others, and at this moment, she could feel that something was profoundly amiss. What do you mean it's time we talk? She asked slowly, her eyes flickering to her mother, who stayed silent. Samuel took a deep breath, striving to maintain his composure. He had dedicated years to mastering the craft of composure, skillfully concealing his emotions within. Yet that was not an option for him at this moment. Not alongside her. Emily, he started, his tone gentler than normal. There's something you're unaware of. I recently discovered this myself. He noticed how her body tensed, how she prepared herself for what lay ahead. He longed for a means to cushion the impact, yet none existed. Laura finally turned, her eyes glistening with remorse. Darling, she said softly as she moved in closer, I need you to pay attention closely. Emily's fingers gently grasped the blanket draped over her lap. Mom, you're making me anxious. Go ahead and express it. Samuel took a deep breath, then uttered the words that would alter the course of everything. I am your father. For an instant, time appeared to freeze. Emily's breath caught in her throat, her expression locked in shock. She released a brief, empty laugh, shaking her head in disbelief. No, she declared, her voice laced with a hope that uttering the words might somehow alter reality. That cannot be done. Laura advanced another step forward. It is, she murmured. Emily's gaze flickered back and forth, her breath coming in quick, uneven bursts. No, she reiterated, her voice escalating in intensity. My father departed prior to my arrival in this world. He had no desire to engage with me. That's what you consistently conveyed to me. Samuel recoiled, the words cutting into him with the sharpness of a knife. He gazed at Laura, who momentarily shut her eyes, as though preparing herself for what was to come. I lied, she admitted, her voice a mere whisper. Emily exhaled sharply, her face twisting into a mix of fury and pain. You were not truthful. Her voice trembled. Is it something along these lines? Emotion filled Laura's eyes. I believed I was acting in your best interest. Emily shook her head with fervor. Best for me, she reiterated, her voice trembling. You allowed me to grow up under the impression that I was unwanted, that my father was indifferent. So, you're saying he's been here all along? I had no idea, Samuel said, leaning forward with urgency. I promise you, Emily, I had no idea. My mother never mentioned it to me. Emily faced him, her eyes aflame with intensity. So, you really trust her? Huh? Is it really that simple? Samuel paused, acutely aware of the depth of her suffering. I faced her, he confessed, and I felt a surge of anger. However, upon examining the facts and the timeline, clarity struck me. And when I laid my eyes upon you, I was aware. His voice took on a gentler quality. Emily, I promise you, had I known, I would have made it there. Emily's cheeks glistened with tears as she released a tremulous breath. I'm not sure how to trust you, she murmured. Samuel sensed a tightening in his chest. He confessed that he didn't anticipate it. Not at this moment. However, It's important for you to understand that my desire is to be present in this moment. If you would permit me." Emily fixed her gaze on him for what felt like an eternity before she finally looked away, her hands quivering in her lap. "I simply require. Time is essential for me." Samuel nodded, though every part of him ached to intervene and set things right. "Take all the time you need," he said softly. Laura perched on the edge of the bed, her hand poised just above Emily's. "Text, I'm truly sorry," she said, her voice heavy with feeling. "I ought to have shared that with you. I ought to have shared that with both of you." Emily remained silent. She angrily brushed away her tears, determined not to let them witness her sorrow. The treachery, the uncertainty, the anguish, it was overwhelming. She arrived at the hospital believing she was merely a patient, and that Dr. Hayes was simply another physician. Now she had to confront the unsettling truth that her whole existence had been built on deception. Samuel observed her, engulfed in a profound sense of helplessness. He had rescued countless souls throughout his journey, yet this marked the first occasion where he felt utterly lost in his ability to mend a life. He longed for a way to alleviate the suffering he had inadvertently inflicted. Yet this was not an issue that could be resolved with a scalpel or stitches. This was an experience profound, one that only the passage of time could mend. After an extended pause, Emily finally uttered a word, her voice scarcely rising above a murmur. "Could you please go? Are you both involved?" Laura appeared utterly devastated, yet she gave a subtle nod. "Absolutely, my dear." Samuel paused for just a moment before rising to his feet. "I'll be close by," he murmured. Emily averted her gaze from him. She gazed at the wall, lost in thought, as if grappling with the heavy burden of all she had just discovered. Samuel and Laura exited the room, gently shutting the door behind them. As soon as they stepped outside, Laura let out a shaky breath. "That was even more dreadful than I had envisioned," she whispered. Samuel dragged his hand down his face, a gesture heavy with weariness. "Patience is required." Laura nodded, her gaze lowered. "I understand." They lingered in quietude for an extended pause. At last, Samuel uttered a few words, his voice barely above a whisper. "The surgery is required for her in the near future. I must take it upon myself to accomplish this task." Laura gazed at him, taken aback. "Do you really think that's the best course of action?" Samuel's jaw clenched. "I must," he stated plainly, not merely in the capacity of her physician, in the role of her father. Laura observed him intently for a moment before giving a nod of understanding. "Make sure nothing happens to her." Samuel locked eyes with her, his demeanor resolute. "I shall not." As they lingered in that moment, each lost in thoughts of the young woman beyond the door, they understood that regardless of the hurt the truth might bring, retreat was not an option. The past had ultimately caught up with them, and now they were compelled to confront the future, side by side. Before moving on, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Samuel sat in his office at Mount Sinai Hospital, his gaze fixed on Emily's medical file, yet the words on the page eluded his comprehension. His thoughts swirled with the echoes of their conversation, her gaze piercing him with a mix of betrayal and disbelief. He had never experienced such a profound sense of helplessness before. He rescued patients teetering on the edge of death, executing surgeries so intricate that other doctors had declined to even try. However, attempting to forge a connection with a daughter he had never known was a daunting endeavor. He let out a long breath, massaging his temples, when a sudden knock on the door jolted him from his thoughts. He glanced upward to find Dr. Rachel Collins, a trusted colleague and one of the rare individuals he held in high regard. "Hey," Rachel remarked as she entered. "Your expression suggests a deep sense of loss, as if you've just parted ways with someone incredibly dear to you." Samuel managed a feeble grin. "Something along those lines." Rachel settled into her seat opposite him, her eyes drifting to the open file that lay on his desk. "Emily Brooks," she said, acknowledging the name. "Your subject." Samuel gave a slight nod. "And my child." Rachel's eyes grew wide with disbelief. "Excuse me, what did you just say?" Samuel reclined in his chair, his hand gliding over his face. I have just discovered. Laura, her mother, kept it to herself. Rachel leaned back, taking in the news with a thoughtful expression. Incredible. That's quite substantial. Samuel emitted a humorless chuckle. Share your thoughts on it. Rachel observed him intently for a moment before she began to speak. How is she managing the situation? Samuel confessed that she requested our departure. She is filled with rage. She lacks confidence in me. Rachel cast him a look filled with understanding. Is it really fair to hold her accountable? Samuel conceded. I am unable to do that. Rachel inclined her body, eager and attentive. What comes next? Will you still proceed with the surgery? I must, Samuel stated with conviction. She deserves the finest, and I won't allow anyone else to jeopardize that. Rachel paused, uncertainty flickering in her mind. Do you really think that's the best course of action? Feelings can obscure clarity, Sam. Samuel let out a deep breath. I'm aware of the dangers, Rachel. Yet this is something I must undertake. Rachel gave a slow nod. Exercise caution in that case. It's crucial to maintain control over your emotions in the operating room. Samuel locked eyes with her, his demeanor grave. I shall not. The following morning, Samuel found himself poring over Emily's most recent test results when the phone in his office began to ring. He answered the call, anticipating a nurse or another doctor. But to his surprise, it was Laura's voice that greeted him on the other end. She expressed a desire to see you, her voice gentle. Samuel felt a sudden jolt in his chest. When will it happen? At this moment, Laura spoke. She is situated in her personal space. Samuel acted swiftly. He snatched his coat and rushed toward Emily's hospital room, his heart racing with every stride. As he arrived at her door, he inhaled deeply, gathering his thoughts before tapping gently. Come in. Emily's voice beckoned, softer than usual. Samuel entered the room and found her propped up in bed, her complexion one yet serene. Laura settled into the chair next to her. Yet this time, silence enveloped the space between them. It was evident that she was allowing Emily to take charge. Emily locked eyes with him, her face a mask of mystery. I must know it all, she declared. All truths revealed. Samuel took a deep breath and then nodded. All right. Emily inhaled deeply. Did you have feelings for my mom? Samuel paused, contemplating his response. Indeed, he replied with sincerity. In our youth, we stumbled and faltered, yet my feelings for her ran profoundly deep. Emily's fingers wove through the fabric of the blanket. So what kept you from being present? Samuel let out a heavy sigh, his heart filled with pain. Since I was unfamiliar with Emily, your mother and I drifted apart, and she never mentioned that she was expecting. If I had known, he said, his voice fading as he shook his head, I would have been present, each and every day. Emily scrutinized him, as if she were attempting to discern the veracity of his words. Following a prolonged quiet, she finally broke the silence once more. Are you interested in being a part of my life at this moment? Samuel acted without a moment's pause. Above all else, Emily gazed downward, her jaw clenched tightly. Text? I'm uncertain about how to process everything, she confessed. It's overwhelming at this pace. I understand, Samuel replied softly. I understand that you may not have all the answers immediately. Yet I remain present, regardless of the circumstances. Emily released a slow breath, her gaze returning to him once more. So, are you still going ahead with the surgery? Samuel gave a slight nod. Absolutely, if that suits you well. Emily paused in silence for a moment before giving a nod. I have faith in you as my doctor, she said softly. I'm still uncertain about placing my trust in you as my father. Samuel sensed a tightness constricting his throat. That's perfectly fine, he remarked. We'll approach this gradually, step by step. Emily offered a subtle nod before shifting her gaze to the window. Samuel understood her need for distance, so he refrained from pressing the issue. Instead, he rose to his feet and faced the door. As he approached, Emily's voice halted him in his tracks. "Is Dr. Hayes available?" He glanced over his shoulder. Indeed. She paused for a moment, then offered him a faint, somewhat tentative smile. "Thanks a lot." Samuel felt a surge of emotion. It may have been modest, but it marked the beginning. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, like our content, and share it with your friends. The day of Emily's surgery dawned, and the air in Mount Sinai Hospital was thick with tension. Samuel had hardly closed his eyes the previous night, his thoughts tangled in a web of anxiety and obligation. Throughout his career, he had executed countless surgeries, many of which were far more intricate than this one. However, none had borne the same emotional significance. He dedicated the past week to meticulous preparation, scrutinizing every aspect of Emily's case, engaging with experts, and ensuring that the plan was flawless in every regard. Yet, despite all his preparations, the reality remained unchanged. The girl lying on that operating table was his daughter. As he prepared for the procedure, the gravity of that understanding pressed heavier in his heart. He had devoted years to the clinical environment of operating rooms, where emotions were set aside in pursuit of the singular goal of saving lives. Yet today stood apart. Today, the realms of his personal and professional life intersected in an unexpected manner. In her hospital room, Emily sat in silence, her fingers tightly clutching the edges of the delicate white blanket draped over her legs. Laura sat beside her, clasping her hand tightly, her own expression etched with concern. Emily had always been resilient, the kind of person who confronted obstacles directly. Yet as the seconds dwindled before her surgery, a deepening anxiety settled within her. It wasn't the process itself that filled her with fear. She had faith in Dr. Hayes, though she still grappled with the uncertainty of fully accepting him as her father. The aftermath was shrouded in uncertainty. Was she ready to welcome him into her world? Was it possible for her to forgive her mother for harboring such a monumental secret? What if complications arise during the surgery? Would she awaken to a new sense of self, both in body and spirit? A nurse stepped into the room, her gentle smile shattering the quietude. "It's time, Emily," she said softly. Emily released a slow breath, giving a nod. She cast a quick look at her mother, who offered a comforting squeeze of her hand. "I'll be right here when you wake up," Laura assured. As they pushed her toward the operating room, Emily's mind raced in a tumultuous whirlwind. The glaring hospital lights above, the gentle buzz of machines, the hushed murmurs of nurses gliding by, everything seemed almost dreamlike. Just as she was about to step fully into the operating room, her eyes caught sight of him. Dr. Hayes, familiar with her father, stood there in his surgical attire, his gaze fixed intently on hers. "You'll be all right, Emily," he reassured, his tone firm yet laced with an unspoken understanding. It was an elusive feeling, one she couldn't fully identify. She longed to respond, yet the anesthesia was swiftly enveloping her senses. Her vision dimmed, and the final image etched in her mind was his face, looming above her as the world slipped into darkness. Within the confines of the operating room, time appeared to stretch and linger. Samuel positioned himself at the operating table, his gloved hands unwavering, his thoughts sharp and concentrated. The team surrounding him operated with precision under his guidance. Yet for him, this surgery transcended the ordinary. It held deep personal significance. Each cut, each gesture needed to be flawless. He was not in a position to make even the slightest error. Rachel stood beside him, observing everything intently, serving as both his partner and his grounding force, ensuring that his feelings didn't obscure his decision-making. The process unfolded seamlessly, yet the atmosphere was thick with unease. As he toiled away, Samuel couldn't help but reflect on all the moments that had slipped through his fingers. Emily's initial strides, her inaugural utterances, her celebrations, her challenges, her victories. He had overlooked everything, and despite his deepest desires, that time was forever lost to him. Yet he might be present at this very moment. He could ensure that she had a promising future. He might strive to become the father she truly needed. After what seemed like a timeless stretch yet also a fleeting instant, the surgery was finished. Samuel exhaled, a release of tension he hadn't been aware of, as he meticulously completed the last stitches. "She is stable," he declared, his voice unwavering. All unfolded according to the blueprint. The group shared subtle nods of relief, yet Samuel hardly took notice. All his attention was directed towards Emily. He took a step back, his gaze resting on her face, now serene in the embrace of anesthesia. At long last, a gentle tide of relief enveloped him. She was fine. He had fulfilled his duty. After what felt like an eternity, Emily gradually stirred in the recovery room, the gentle beeping of monitors being the first sound to penetrate her awareness. Her body felt weighed down, her throat parched, but as her eyelids slowly lifted, the first sight that greeted her was her mother, seated beside her, concern etched across her features. "Mom," she whispered, her voice raspy. Laura's expression transformed into one of pure relief and joy. "You're awake," she murmured, gently tucking a strand of hair behind Emily's forehead. "Everything unfolded flawlessly, my dear. You're doing fine." Emily swallowed, her throat aching yet bearable. "He accomplished it." Laura gave a slight nod. "Indeed, he has been keeping tabs on you every hour." Emily tilted her head just enough to catch sight of the doorway, where Dr. Hayes lingered, observing in silence. Their eyes locked, and in that moment, she perceived a new depth in his expression. Fear. Something she had never seen before. It's not the anxiety of a surgeon's error, but the dread of a father who nearly lost something he never realized he possessed. For an extended silence, neither of them uttered a word. Then, with deliberate care, Samuel advanced a step. "How do you feel?" he inquired gently. Emily pondered the question thoughtfully before responding. "It was as if I had just undergone surgery," she remarked, attempting a faint smile. Samuel exhaled a brief chuckle. "That seems reasonable." A quietude lingered between them, yet it lacked the tension of earlier moments. A change lingered in the air. Comprehension. A connection forged anew, one that had previously been absent. "Thank you," Emily said at last, her voice soft yet heartfelt. Samuel felt a constriction in his throat. "No need for gratitude." Emily's gaze remained steadfast. "I believe I do." Samuel nodded, his feelings too intricate to articulate. He had dedicated his life to rescuing those he didn't know, but today he had saved someone who held a significance greater than he had ever understood. For the first time, he transcended the title of Dr. Hayes. He held the role of a father. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, like, and share it with your friends. The days after Emily's surgery unfolded in a haze of healing, navigating discomfort, and introspective pauses of understanding. She stayed at Mount Sinai for observation, and while the most challenging times were behind her, a lengthy journey still lay ahead. Each morning, caregivers arrived to monitor her vitals, physicians assessed her progress, and her mother remained steadfastly by her side. Yet, the most surprising element was Samuel's arrival. She had anticipated that he would vanish after the surgery, slipping back into his life as though nothing had shifted. Yet he chose not to. Without exception, he arrived each day to see how she was doing. At times, he would linger for just a brief moment, inquiring about her pain levels and elucidating the intricacies of her recovery journey. At other moments, he remained still in the chair by the window, absorbed in his own reflections as she floated between wakefulness and slumber. Both were at a loss for words, yet neither felt inclined to part ways. One afternoon, Emily stirred from her nap to discover him in that familiar chair, gazing out at the New York skyline. He appeared weary, more aged than she had ever observed, as though the weight of countless days had finally taken its toll on him. She cleared her throat, and he turned his head, momentarily startled before his expression softened. "So you're awake," he remarked. She inclined her head, adjusting her position against the cushions. "Indeed, it seems I'm not accustomed to having an abundance of time for rest." Samuel released a soft, amused laugh. "That will be different before long." Once you leave this place, you'll need to attend physical therapy sessions and adhere to several restrictions. Relish the tranquility while it lasts. Emily observed him intently for a prolonged moment. Initially, he had maintained a level of professionalism, keeping a certain distance, but now there was a warmth in his voice, a quality that felt almost paternal. "Why are you still here?" she inquired. Samuel paused, his fingers drumming softly on the armrest of the chair. He confessed it was simply because he desired to be. "I feel the weight of longing more than I can bear." Emily found herself at a loss for words in that moment. A part of her yearned to feel anger, to seek out the reasons for his absence in her life until now. Yet, another part of her perceived the sorrow reflected in his gaze, the manner in which he moved through life like a soul burdened by memories long gone. And she realized that certain things were beyond alteration. She finally admitted, "I'm not sure how to approach this. I'm struggling to come to terms with it." Samuel inclined his head with deliberation. "I feel the same way." He let out a deep breath, his hand moving wearily across his face. "I have dedicated my entire existence to mending others, Emily. However, I'm uncertain about how to resolve this issue. I'm uncertain if it's within my capabilities." Emily bit her lip, her gaze fixed on her hands. "Perhaps it doesn't require any adjustments. Perhaps we should determine our next steps from this point onward." Samuel let out a breath, nodding in agreement. Perhaps that could be the case. They lingered in quietude for a moment, the ambient noises of the hospital weaving through the stillness that enveloped them. The conversation may not have been flawless, yet it marked the beginning of something new. For the time being, that sufficed. The following days unfolded with a blend of advancement and exasperation. Emily's body was mending, yet the emotional wounds proved more challenging to traverse. She appreciated her mother's unwavering support, yet the strain between Laura and Samuel was unmistakable. In the silence of the room, they exchanged no words, yet Emily sensed the weight of unvoiced thoughts lingering in the air between them. One afternoon, after Samuel had departed, Emily finally confronted the matter. She observed her mother intently, pressing, "You still haven't explained why you never told him." With a heavy sigh, Laura settled beside her bed. She confessed her fear. "Upon discovering my pregnancy, Samuel was already immersed in his medical studies. He possessed an entire future filled with possibilities, and I was consumed by the fear that revealing the truth would shatter it all." And then the moments slipped away. The more time passed, the more difficult it grew. Emily gave a slight shake of her head. Yet he had a right to be informed. Laura's eyes brimmed with remorse. "I understand. For years, I've carried the weight of that regret. However, altering the past is beyond my reach, Emily. I can only wish for you and Samuel to discover a path to progress." Emily remained silent. She found herself at a loss for words. The harm was irreversible, and solutions were elusive. Later that evening, Samuel made his way back, but this time he had company. A woman in her early 50s entered alongside him, her aura both authoritative and inviting. Her shoulder-length brown hair was elegantly streaked with silver, and she donned a navy blazer over a pristine white blouse. Emily arched an eyebrow, a look of confusion crossing her face. "Emily," Samuel remarked, "allow me to introduce you to Rachel. She is my spouse." Emily felt a sudden rush of emotion. She had never considered the possibility that Samuel could have a family of his own. A spouse, perhaps even other children. In an instant, the circumstances appeared to have grown increasingly intricate. Rachel approached with a gentle smile, radiating warmth. "It's a pleasure to meet you, Emily. I've heard a great deal about you." Emily blinked, surprised by the unexpected turn of events. "You possess." Rachel let out a soft laugh. "Indeed. Since discovering the news, Samuel has been incessantly discussing you." She cast a quick look at Samuel, who appeared somewhat sheepish. "I felt it was important to be here to let you know that no matter what unfolds from this point on, you have support. I understand this may be overwhelming, but please remember I'm here for you if you need anything." Emily found herself at a loss for words. She had anticipated some tension, perhaps even hostility, yet Rachel appeared to be truly kind. and in some way that intensified the sense of being overwhelmed. Emily finally expressed her gratitude. Rachel gave a subtle nod. Excellent. Because I truly intended it. Once Rachel departed, Emily shifted her gaze to Samuel. She appears to be quite pleasant. Samuel beamed with delight. Indeed, she is. She was eager to meet you, fully aware of the significance of this moment. Emily paused for a moment before inquiring, "Do you have other children?" Samuel gave a slight shake of his head. "Negative. Rachel and I never had kids." There was an unspoken depth in his voice that hinted at untold layers of the story, yet Emily chose to hold back her curiosity. Instead, she simply nodded, allowing the information to sink in. As the night progressed, Emily came to understand that transformations were unfolding in ways she had never anticipated. She entered the surgery believing it was solely about her health, yet it evolved into something far greater. It revolved around the essence of family, the weight of lost moments, and the journey of finding a path ahead. Though she lacked all the answers at this moment, one certainty stood clear in her mind. This is just the start. Before moving on, please subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Time seemed to stretch as Emily navigated her new reality beyond the hospital walls. She found herself once again in her cozy Brooklyn apartment, healing at home with her mother's support. Even as her body mended, her mind remained a tumultuous landscape of feelings. For 22 years, she had lived under the impression that she was fatherless. And now, not only had the truth been revealed, but it turned out her father was among the most esteemed doctors in New York. She found it difficult to comprehend, and even more challenging to determine how to act on that knowledge. Samuel had allowed her the distance she needed since her discharge, sending the occasional message to see how she was doing, yet she sensed he was patiently anticipating her to make the first move, and she was uncertain if she was prepared. One evening, as she nestled on the couch, a blanket draped around her legs, she scrolled aimlessly through her phone when her mother entered, carrying a cup of tea. Laura remained silent, her demeanor unchanged since Emily's surgery, and this evening was no exception. She set the tea down on the coffee table and took a seat next to Emily, observing her for a brief moment before breaking the silence. "He called today," she murmured gently. Emily raised her gaze. "Is that you, Samuel?" Laura gave a slight nod. "He was curious about your well-being. I mentioned that you're doing well, but he insists on seeing you." Emily let out a breath, her fingers weaving through her hair. "I'm not sure, Mom. It's simply overwhelming." With a soft sigh, Laura tucked her legs beneath her. "I understand. Avoiding him will not simplify things." Emily gazed at the tea, her fingers idly tracing the edge of her blanket. "Did he mention the reason for wanting to meet with me?" Laura paused, contemplating her response. "He mentioned a desire to have a conversation. He seeks to share his perspective, to articulate his version of events." Emily let out a derisive laugh. "What about his perspective? Which side?" "He was completely unaware of my presence." "Indeed," Laura responded softly. "But don't you believe he should have the opportunity to express himself? Answers are something you are entitled to as well." Emily exhaled deeply. Perhaps she had a point. Perhaps listening to him would provide clarity in the midst of all this confusion. The following afternoon, Emily stood outside a coffee shop in Manhattan, feeling a sense of unease as she waited. She had consented to meet Samuel, yet she remained uncertain about what she truly sought to achieve from the encounter. The idea of facing him and discussing long-buried matters sent a knot of anxiety through her stomach. However, upon his arrival, appearing a bit anxious as well, she understood that she wasn't the sole one facing difficulties. They occupied a quaint table by the window, the vibrant city life unfolding beyond the glass. Samuel requested a black coffee while Emily opted for tea, both remaining silent as the barista busily prepared their drinks behind the counter. As the drinks were placed before them, Samuel finally shattered the stillness that had enveloped the moment. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice measured, as though he feared the weight of his words. Emily gently stirred her tea, observing the liquid dance and swirl in the cup. "I thought it was the right moment for us to have a conversation." He nodded, inhaling deeply. I'm unsure of how to begin. I suppose. I want you to understand that had I been aware of your existence, circumstances would have unfolded in a different manner. Emily lifted her eyes, locking onto his stare. What a contrast. I wouldn't have stayed away, he stated with conviction. I would have stood by your side. In honor of your mother, I would have given my all to be included in your world. Emily released a sardonic laugh. It seems that didn't occur. Did it? Samuel's jaw clenched, yet he remained composed. Instead, he inclined his body forward just a bit. I understand that you're feeling upset. You absolutely deserve to feel that way. However, I need you to grasp that this was not my decision. I chose to stay put. I was completely unaware that a choice existed for me. Emily sensed a tightness in her throat. Her entire existence had been shaped by the conviction of abandonment, yet now uncertainty clouded her thoughts. What happens now? She inquired, her voice softer than it had been. Samuel paused, as though contemplating his choice of words. Ultimately, the decision rests with you, he concluded. I don't wish to pressure you into any decisions. However, I wish to understand you better. If you would allow me to. Emily observed him intently, looking for any hint of dishonesty. Yet, all she perceived was a man burdened by genuine remorse for the events that had unfolded. For the first time, she found herself contemplating what her life might have been like with him by her side all those years. She confessed, I'm not sure how to approach this. He replied with a faint smile, Neither do I. Perhaps we can unravel this together. They lingered in conversation, discussing matters entirely unrelated to what had come before. Emily shared her aspirations for education, her passion for painting, and the dreams she had nurtured about exploring the world. Samuel shared with her the story of his life beyond the hospital walls, recounting the moment he met Rachel and the weight of his lingering regrets. For the first time, Emily perceived him not merely as the surgeon who had unwittingly operated on his own daughter, but as a man who had been stripped of something just as significant as she had. Though she wasn't prepared to label him as dad just yet, she was certain of one thing. She wanted to give it a shot. Before we proceed, kindly subscribe to our channel, and don't forget to like and share it with your friends. Emily lingered outside the restaurant, her gaze fixed on the city lights shimmering on the rain-soaked pavement. The evening breeze was sharp, imbued with an unmistakable air of conclusion. Samuel lingered next to her, his hands tucked into his pockets, observing her intently as though he feared uttering the wrong words. The past few weeks had been a tempest of feelings. Anger, confusion, hesitation. But now, as she stood here, she sensed something entirely new. It wasn't flawless and it definitely wasn't simple, but for the first time in her life, she sensed that she had a grip on her narrative. For years, she carried the weight of feeling unwanted, only to discover that her father had been unaware of her very existence. And now that he longed to be present. That held greater significance than she had anticipated. Samuel took a moment to clear his throat. I understand that the past is unchangeable, Emily, and I realize that forgiveness won't come easily or quickly, but I genuinely want to make an effort. I wish to be a part of your life in whatever way you desire. His voice carried a genuine quality, yet it was tinged with an underlying anxiety, a palpable fear of being turned away. Emily recognized that expression in the eyes of Patience's families, the yearning for a glimmer of hope that everything might turn out all right, despite the unfavorable odds stacked against them. She inhaled deeply, gathering her thoughts, before finally turning to meet his gaze. I'm not sure how to approach this, she confessed. I'm unsure of what it's like to have a father, but I believe I'm curious to discover that experience. Samuel's shoulders eased, his face transforming from wary anticipation to serene contentment. He nodded, allowing her to take the lead, gently respecting her rhythm without any pressure. It was everything she had ever desired, the freedom to choose not to be abandoned once more. In the weeks that followed, their encounters became more frequent, transcending the roles of doctor and patient, shedding the guise of strangers, and evolving into two individuals striving to reconstruct something that had never truly been there. She encountered his wife Rachel, who greeted her with kindness rather than hostility, and gradually she started to embrace the notion that she wasn't an intruder in Samuel's life. She belonged to it. Encountering her half-brothers had been a daunting experience, yet they welcomed her with warmth and an inquisitive spirit instead of doubt. Entering a family she had never encountered felt surreal, yet as moments unfolded, the unfamiliarity dissipated, giving way to a feeling she had never allowed herself to dream of. One evening, she found herself scrolling through old childhood photos, the ones featuring just her and her mom, and for the first time, she experienced a sense of peace instead of a pang of sadness. She would forever cherish her mother for all that she had accomplished, yet now she was free from the burden of an unfinished narrative. Her father was present, making an effort, and that was sufficient. Life wasn't defined by flawless conclusions. It was shaped by those who were present when it truly counted. And this time she had company.